My name is Bayode, and today I'm going to be talking about the serial killer William Bonin. Now, before I get into any of the murders that he did, William had a very long history of sexual abuse and trauma, and also a long history of sexually abusing and traumatizing others. So let's go ahead and let's start talking about his childhood. William Bonin was born on January 8th, 1947, in Connecticut, and was given the name the Freeway Strangler and the Freeway Killer. William had killed, tortured, and raped young men and boys between 1960 and 1980. He was charged for 14 murders, but it is suspected that he had murdered 21 people. Now, like I said, we're going to go ahead and talk about his long line of, getting abused and abusing others before we get into anybody he murdered. Alright, William was the second of 3 sons. Both of his parents were alcoholics. His mother was emotionally distant, and his father was also a gambling addict. On top of this, William's mother also suffered from severe mood swings. Not only was his father a gambler, but he was also physically abusive to all 3 boys. So one day, William's dad was out gambling again, and he ended up gambling away their entire house. All 5 of the people living in William's house had to get up and move in with his grandmother. William had once ran his bike into a group of girls and was sent to a juvenile hall. Now, I had to look up the difference between a juvenile hall and a juvenile detention center, and what I've found is that a juvenile hall is more of a place where kids are held before trial, and a juvenile detention center is where they're held after trial, like a prison. After he was done in juvenile hall and went to trial, he was sent back home and started to become more and more uncooperative with his parents. In September 1963, William and his older brother, Robert Jr., were sent to Franco-American Catholic school, where they were both repeatedly abused by the nuns. One example of the abuse that the boys were enduring was whenever William was forced to punch a fence whenever he misbehaved. That's only one example of the abuse these boys were enduring during their time in this school. The whole time, William and his brother Robert were inside of this school, their parents never came to visit them, which made the boys believe that their parents were actually dead. Alright, now I wrote down Franco-American school because that's what I found in some of the readings that I had done, but I also found 2 other schools. Joseph Catholic School and St. Mary's Catholic School. So any one of them could be right, or they could have both gone to all 3 of them, I don't know, but these are the ones that I found. The brothers had eventually left Franco-American school and went back to live with their parents in his grandparents' house. William Bonin then joined the school that his younger brother went to. In this school, Bonin was bullied again, and then soon became a juvenile delinquent. Bonin's neighbors repeatedly said that they don't ever remember seeing the boys around their parents, which just tells me how little their parents were actually involved in their lives. His mom and dad were both alcoholics, so they were probably drunk most of the time, plus his dad's gambling addiction, and his mom had the severe mood swings, so none of this is a good recipe for good parenting. One day, Bonin and his 2 other brothers, his younger brother and his older brother, were left with their grandfather. Mind you, their grandfather is a known pedophile. Okay, known pedophile who had actually molested their mom. So my question here is, why would the mom let them go stay with their grandfather? And yes, there might be situations like, oh well, maybe they were too young and they needed to be around an adult, or, something like that. But that doesn't really make too much sense to me, because it seems like these parents are never really around their children anyways. So it's kind of like they're alone all the time. And also, the mother herself was molested by their grandfather, her dad. So did she just think that what happened to her wasn't going to happen to them? Well, she was wrong. Anyways, their mother actually began to believe that her dad had molested her boys, which is true. Robert Jr., the oldest brother, actually began to beat and belittle his younger siblings, including William, mainly because of the abuse he was enduring himself from their father, William. Now, William began to steal license plates and other things off of cars, and he was placed into a juvenile detention center. While he was incarcerated, William was molested by a male counselor, so no matter where this guy goes, he just can't escape the abuse that he's enduring. No matter if it's from the physical abuse from his father, the sexual abuse from his grandfather, and even more sexual abuse from strangers, Let's keep going. Alright, now here's where we get into the grosser stuff. The stuff that really just tells me that William was going to turn out terrible either way. Alright. After Bonin was released from that juvenile detention center, he began to molest his younger brother, Paul. Paul had informed his mom about this, and their mom decided to put them in separate rooms. Now, again, nobody is thinking clearly about this situation, and I can tell that they're not thinking clearly. Now, they live in the same house, William and Paul, his younger brother. The mom, having them just sleep in different rooms, sure might seem like a temporary fix for something, but the fact that these boys spend a lot of time unsupervised also tells me that it's probably not just in their room that Paul is getting molested. It's probably anywhere else that they're possibly alone. So, that doesn't seem like the smartest fix to me, but it was 1947, so let's keep going. Bonin was known to be a socially awkward boy who maintained mediocre grades, although he realized his interest in pedophilia continuing to grow in his teenage years. Well, mind you, again, he had crashed his bike into a group of girls, been to a juvenile hall, juvenile detention center, been molested by multiple people, and physically abused by his father, all before he was a teenager. William had then dropped out of high school and began to molest the neighborhood children. His mother had kicked him out of the house, mainly because of his interest in pedophilia, which, mind you, why didn't she do anything about that before? Oh right, because they're all really distant from each other. Let's keep going. Bonin had then joined the Air Force out of a lack of interest in anything else. While in the Air Force, he had married a girl named Linda, mainly because his mother wanted him to. While in this marriage, he had told his wife that he would frequently have nightmares about sexually assaulting and murdering women. Now, I don't know if this scared her, but I really hope that it did, because that is absolutely insane and terrifying to hear from somebody you're that close with. Alright, while William was in the Air Force, he went on to fight in the Vietnam War, where he ended up molesting 2 soldiers. When Bonin returned home after 3 years, he had learned that his wife Linda had given birth to their son, and also left him for another man, which honestly good for her because William is insane. After he learned this, he had moved back home with his parents and began working at a gas station. Alright, so before his murders, he had committed a lot of sexual assaults against mainly young boys. So I'm going to talk about those first before we get into the murders. Mind you, I'm only going to talk about a few of the sexual assaults because there were a lot that I found. Bonin had picked up a 14-year-old boy named Billy Jones on November 17th, 1968. Bonin offered him a ride, but after he started questioning the boy about homosexuality, the boy had ran away. But Bonin had caught up to him, drove him to a shopping mall, where he raped and knocked him unconscious. Afterwards, he ended up dropping him off right at home. On January 1st, 1969, Bonin offered a 12-year-old boy a ride home, and once the boy got in the car, he molested and robbed him at gunpoint. A 12-year-old. Bonin had been caught for his multiple sexual crimes and was sent to Toscadrio State Hospital. I guarantee you I said that wrong. After he was released, he went on to have a few different jobs, one of which he was a truck driver, but he was fired because he ended up crashing the truck. Then he went on to commit more sexual related crimes onto more young boys. His victims tended to be young schoolboys, hitchhikers, and male prostitutes. Their ages ranged from 12 to 19. Bonin would usually invite boys into his van, where he would overpower them, bind their limbs with handcuffs, wires, or cords. Then he would sexually assault, beat, torture, and then kill them by strangulation. Kill them by strangulation, either with their own clothes or a tire iron. To keep the boys from escaping, he would usually remove the door handles from off of his car. The boys were usually killed in the van, and their bodies were dumped along various freeways, which is why he has the name the Freeway Killer and the Freeway Strangler. His first murder victim was Glenn Lundgren, a 13-year-old boy. Glenn was last seen at his home. After telling his parents he was going to meet up with someone to take some photos for a skateboard magazine. On August 4th, William drove from Silverado Canyon to Westminster to meet up with a good friend named Vernon Butts. Bonin had suggested to Vernon that they should rape and murder a teenage hitchhiker, which Vernon agreed to. Now, these guys have to have been both insane, because how are you going to meet up with an old friend of yours, and one of the first things he says is, hey, we should go kill a teenager, and you decide, oh yeah, that's a good idea. Anyways, Bonin had kidnapped a 17-year-old named Mark Shelton. Bonin had offered the boy $400 in exchange for sexual activity. Vernon and Bonin started to sexually assault the boy with objects, which made the boy go into shock, which proved to be fatal. Vernon and William decided to drop his body off on Cajun Pass. The very next day, Bonin and Vernon found another 17-year-old boy who agreed to engage in sexual activity and agreed to be bound with wire. Bonin had gotten a kitchen knife, and both him and Vernon proceeded to rape and beat the boy. His body was dropped off in Malibu Creek the next day. Bonin was caught for molesting another 17-year-old boy. He didn't show up for his court date, instead decided to continue his murder spree. Bonin had also moved back into the house with his parents. He had gained the reputation of a child molester, and his neighbors recalled Bonin luring children into his house, and then they could later hear screaming and crying coming from these children, which, mind you, why didn't anybody help? Sometimes Bonin's parents were also in the house at the same time that Bonin was molesting these young boys, but his parents say that they don't ever remember any of this happening. That definitely sounds like a lie. Literally, from the beginning of William's life, let's say maybe when he was 11, he had told his mom that he was interested in pedophilia and all this crazy stuff. That's why she had kicked him out. So why is it so insane for them to believe that, he actually is raping and assaulting these boys? I don't know. During the rest of the killing spree, William went on to murder 11 more boys, which is obviously too much for me to talk about all here. Murders all happened in similar ways. He would lure the boys into the van with either money, sex, or rides anywhere they wanted. He would eventually assault them and strangle them and dump their bodies off on freeways. Eventually, Vernon had stopped joining in on these murders for reasons that I don't know. Yeah. William would beat, tie their limbs together, rape, and sodomize them. He would strangle them and dump their bodies off on different freeways. It was known that Bonin had lured multiple boys into his van per day and would kill all of them and dump their bodies in the same location. William was eventually caught and taken to trial in 1981. He wasn't sentenced to jail until January 6th, 1982. William was then sentenced to death for 10 of the murders. After he had served about a year, he was then charged for the murder of 4 more boys and was handed a second death sentence. He was executed by lethal injection on February 23rd, 1996, in San Quentin State Prison. I guarantee you I said that wrong. Alright, now here's some extra stuff that I had just learned while, learning about this guy, this very strange guy. Some more facts about him are he was the first inmate in California to die by lethal injection. Yippee for him! Wow, isn't he a first? Alright, a second one is his last meal, which was 2 large pepperoni and sausage pizzas, 3 pints of coffee ice cream, and 3 6-packs of Coca-Cola. Apparently, his last words as he was being executed were, "I feel the death penalty is not an answer to the problems at hand. That I feel it sends the wrong message to the youth of the country. Young people act as they see other people acting, instead of as people tell them to act. And I would suggest that when a person has a thought of doing anything serious against the law, that before they did, that they should go to a quiet place and think about it seriously." Alright. What a, final sentence, I guess. Let's just go ahead and recap on this. This guy was really gross. I mean, he started molesting his brother before he was a teenager. Like, he was maybe 8, and he's molesting his younger brother. Like, that's absolutely insane. And let's not overlook all of the trauma that he, also went into. We already know that a lot of serial killers have a lot of trauma before they start killing, right? Some people believe that serial killers are just born and now they want to just kill everybody for whatever reason, which is, pretty untrue. I mean, sure, there are some people who've had pretty good lives and they still end up killing people for no reason, but mainly it's because of all the trauma that they had when they were younger. And this guy is a prime example of all the trauma. Another thing of mine is, if he was picking up multiple boys per day and dropping them off in the same location, how did nobody ever see that? Like, did he have just a pile of these boys in the back of his van and he chucked them all out in the same area? I really don't know. And that's something that I should probably look more into. Anyways, I'm gonna go ahead and call it there. I hope you enjoyed, or at least found it interesting, learning about William Bonin. And I will see you next time. Bye-bye. Alright, bye-bye.